Hey Lila, so wanted to show you real quick what I was talking about as far as getting textures in here. So I've got your PSD opened up here, and what I want to do is just, for example, show you a texture I've got here. So this is super duper high res, just FYI, it's very big. I'm going to, well, I'll bring it in here. Okay, so just click and drag it in here. You can see how massive it is. It's actually, that's how big it is, right? So let me find that. I'm going to, yeah, I'll leave it above your art layer here. You can see that in the layers panel. That's not what I want. I want to grab this, right? So I'm gonna scale this down, right? So use Control T to bring that down in size. Okay, that works, right? So now let's say I lower the opacity on this, right? It's gonna make everything look lighter. Like right now it's at 70% opacity, but the reason why it's like lightening everything, at least it's lightening the dark black areas, is just because it's still set to normal. So in the layer mode here, this is where we want to switch it to multiply. So you can see when we switch it to multiply, it's almost like it makes it transparent so that what's black is not going to really be affected by it, because it's already, black is already as dark as you can get, right? But wherever you have things that are lighter than black, you'll be able to see that texture. So like if we lower the opacity on your black artwork here, for example, and then we turn this on the texture layer on multiply, we can see that texture showing through where your black is, because it's not black, right? We made it kind of a lighter opacity. So if we turn it back to black, we can see what we're working with here. So now this is where I recommended that you adjust the levels, meaning you adjust the contrast of your texture. So that you can do that here. If you hover over this little guy, you've done this before, you can create a new adjustment layer, right? So click on this and you find levels. Levels here, in your properties, you can then adjust, you can like make the darks darker, you can make the highlights even brighter, right? Just by playing with the sliders, the midtones, you can lighten or you can darken, right? So I'll like adjust this a little bit. I'll crank up those highlights so there's more white overall in the texture. I can darken some of the dark parts, right? Make it grittier. Increase that, right? Now the issue now is it's this color, right? It's this intense color. There's some blue in the original, right? Some weird like goo and stuff. So I don't want that, right? I just want black and white, because that's kind of what we're going for here. So what you could do is make an adjustment layer just like you did with the levels, right? You do that, but now you use the hue saturation. So click on that guy, and here you can adjust, right? You can take your saturation and bring it all the way down to the left. So it's like -100, and that sucks all the color out of it. So it was here, right? I'm gonna drag that slider to the left and it makes it like pure grayscale, right? So now we can see we've got what we want with some of this subtle texture. You know, we can lower the opacity on the texture if we want. But generally I would take these and I would merge them, right? So now I have just my black and white texture. I need to set it to multiply again, right? So there you go. Oh man, I'm getting so confused clicking on the Mac after I've been on the PC at school. So then, you know, if there's some areas where you're like, oh, I don't want this chunk, right? You can create a mask, right? So here in your layers panel at the bottom, you can click that to create a layer mask. And then you use black, you know, you can paint this out with black on the mask here. So you can paint it out with black, you know, to clean up some of those areas. You can use like, change the opacity of your brush, right? If you want to make it a little more gradual, things like that, right? If you want to clean up some stuff, you know. So, you maybe you like this scratch here, but you don't want these, right? So you can paint those out, things like that, lighten it up. The other thing I wanted to show you is, let's say you actually want to have like kind of a light gritty texture over your black ink artwork, right? So right now we can't see any texture over the black, right? We just see texture over the white areas. That's because we have this textures currently set to multiply, right? So it has that, it's that transparent. So it's like if there's something dark on this layer, you set it to multiply, it will darken whatever is light underneath it, right? So anything white in your layers, you'll be able to see that dark texture. But if I want to make the black textured with like a white grit, what you can do is just duplicate your texture layer. So I do that Control J to duplicate it, okay? Except now, this is going to be a little trick here. I'm going to drop this new one. I'm going to invert this. So I'm going to make it black and white, right? So that's just where you do Control I. Control I will invert it. So you can see now it's this. It's like the inverse, right, of this. It's like a photo negative, right? So Control I lets you invert it, invert the values and the colors and everything. But now I'm going to turn my art back on here, and I'm going to set this not to multiply, but to screen. Okay, so now it's on screen, and now look what you can do in those black areas, right? I'm going to close this out. So now because we have this black texture, mostly dark texture with light, light texture inside of it, when you set that to screen, the black won't change anything that's dark, but the lighter values in your texture, like this lighter gray, is going to show up in your dark ink underneath. So you can, again, grab like the levels. So you can do this. You can click there to do levels adjustment, or you can do what I like to do is shortcut. So Control L. Control L will bring up your levels adjustment here. And then you say these highlights, the texture in here, I want to lighten that up. So I'm going to click and drag that, lighten it up, right? So that's maybe too much. So what happens if I take the darks and I darken them a bit more? So now you get this more like, kind of like crispy, pure black and white grit, right? It's got less variation, it's more harsh, right? So you think, ooh, that's kind of nice, right? We can move that texture layer around, right? I'm just like clicking and dragging the texture to kind of see if I like, different placement. You can rotate it, right? So Control T, rotate your texture if you want like the angle a little different, stuff like that. And then the same thing, like how we masked out areas, like if there's certain chunks in here where you're like, ooh, I don't like, I don't like this area right here. I want to get rid of that. So you can go on your texture layer, go into the mask, right? The layer mask, and then use black to kind of paint out some of that, right? So you're like, ooh, I don't like this little speck here, so I'm gonna erase that, right? Use that just by painting black on your mask. So yeah, that's about it. Yeah, again, a light texture like this, where you want to have that dark stuff over like a lighter area in your art, you're going to use multiply. And if you want to have a lighter texture, lighter grit, or paper tooth or something like that over your black ink or your dark colors, your dark values, you'll set that to screen in the layer mode here. So there you go. Hope that is helpful. Let me know if there is anything else that didn't cover. But yeah, we can chat over video call tomorrow. So, all right, we'll talk to you then.